Three, two, one, action.
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Hello, and welcome to episode 5. Yes, number 5 of the Wrestling and Film podcast. It's pretty crazy that we're on number 5, but it's been fun thus far. I hope those of you who have listened have learned, enjoyed, and been entertained by the Wrestling and Film podcast thus far. It's been really cool to dive into some of these interviews, some of the more kind of just individual ramblings of mine. Also, my brother's when he joined me on the previous episode when we dived into Dave Bautista in Blade Runner 2049 on the 5-year anniversary of that film. So it's been great. It's been really enjoyable thus far. This week, though, we carry on. The ball continues to roll, and we go back to the A&E WWE director interviews. And on this episode, Kory Kozak is back as we discuss the Edge A&E biography that came out a couple of months ago in season 2 of WWE Legends on A&E. This one, Kory did not direct, but he was a producer and heavily involved in kind of the creation of the documentary, as he was with the Undertaker one. He is titled as a producer on this, but the director is also a creative partner of Kory, so he was very much involved. So it was wonderful to go back to the well, so to speak, and discuss the Edge documentary because it was so much different. Edge's story is so much different to the Undertaker's, and in this biography that Kory was involved in for A&E, we see again such a different light on Edge, and they really dig deep and unpick the emotion and the significance of Edge's journey from, a really poor kid in Canada, his relationship with his mother, his relationship with, some of his family members, Christian, and the struggles, like the real struggles that he had to get to WWE, and them unpicking that in such detail. I mean, it hits hard. The emotion really hits hard. I found myself getting emotional on multiple occasions watching this documentary, and Edge's journey is so inspiring. And I say it in this interview with Kory that Edge's journey is almost like it's like a Rocky film, and you could never tire of seeing a story like that. And I love what they did. Those of you who haven't seen it, I really encourage you to go back and watch this documentary. If for no other reason, if you feel like you've known it all and you've seen it all with Edge's story, the feel good nature of it just makes it. Apologies, just makes it worthwhile. So I loved diving into this interview because I love the documentary so much. So and again, Kory is such a wonderful guest, such a wonderful person to talk to. So a wealth of knowledge, a really great perspective, and we dive into so many different realms of creating this documentary um, from Edge's initial hesitancy that Kory mentioned in my previous interview with him with when we discussed the Undertaker documentary, how he did recreations for this documentary to support the footage, the almost the lack of not lack of respect perhaps, but sometimes the how people can forget Edge's greatness and what he's done in this industry and how successful he's been. And yeah, so much more. The general, the ongoing conversation about the perception of professional wrestling and why it's been disrespected so much. So many interesting conversations and topics we go into in this interview, and I really hope you enjoy it. And it is the third part of my WWE A&E series, and I hope you enjoy this interview with Kory Kozak. Hey, Kory.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, very well. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. What's going on?
Nothing much. I mean, just enjoying your work
Oh,
recently.
thanks. Appreciate it. Nice to
I,
get that one done. So
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, I was gonna say, obviously, I asked you about after the Undertaker one, but now, since the Edge is done, have you had time to relax?
a little bit, a little bit. It's like a little. We're jumping into two more, and
Of course, the ones you said last time, right?
yeah. So it's like we kind of relax, but then at the same time, I'm like, all right, I want to try to get these next two shows done. My goal is to get them done by Thanksgiving. I think it may be a little ambitious, but that's what we're shooting for. But
Because if I mean, you don't have to obviously tell me that much, but I mean, I imagine there's two like full length episodes again, or something along those lines.
yeah, it's 2 2 hours. So
Oh well,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they'll be good. We're excited about them. I can't tell you who they are
yeah.
yet until they announce, but yeah, they'll be good.
I look forward to it. I mean, congratulations again though on the Edge one. Again, I think you guys did an awesome job, and I would say more emotional this time than the Undertaker one. It got me a couple of times. Like,
Yeah,
uh,
Edge's story is a little deeper, I think, in some ways, and with everything thing he went through. So yeah, it was definitely a little bit more, little more. And I think even his backstory growing up too was a little emotional too. So yeah,
did def-
it's cool to see that.
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I would definitely going to get into that. What was the transition like for you though, going from Undertaker to Edge? Because it was quite quick. I mean, I don't think you had much breathing room between the
Sure,
two.
yeah, we did them at the same time.
Yeah,
So
I don't.
essentially,
Yeah,
that's how it kind of worked. So we had been producing both of them. Yaron Descalo worked on that one with me. He worked on
yeah,
both of them with me, but Yaron really kind of captained Edge a lot more. And but we've been working together for a long time, so we have a good relationship. And it's nice to have somebody you can trust. And so we've been on all the major shoots together, and then really with Edge, it was like getting started, heading out to Asheville. And when we started with him, his schedule was so light. He was on TV, I think, once a month at that point,
oh, nice.
So he's like, I have all the time in the world, all the time in the world. I think we shot with him, I'm gonna say like March, maybe it was early March. And I think literally it was right before Royal Rumble or something like that, maybe right after. And then all of a sudden his schedule just picked up, and he was doing like week to week, and they're amping it up for WrestleMania. And he went from being like very available to really hard to nail down because he's active. So yeah, it was tough. I think bouncing back between the two of them. Some of it was interesting because some of the interviews overlapped. So we had guys like Mick Foley, and Foley was probably he was a key character in both of them. He was probably
Yep.
the most. But like trying to get those interviews done, making sure we have the interviews right, we're not missing anything. We're not leaning too much on one way, then we have to go back and get them again. So yeah, it was just being organized and staying on it. But it was cool doing both. I mean, it's two really interesting people for sure, between Mark Calloway and Adam Copeland.
Yeah, I mean, the way I looked at it, and obviously they're documentaries and they're real stories, but like when you're making a film, I guess you can still look at it from like the perspective of you're making like a fictional film. Like Undertaker's is like a character exploration, where Edge's is almost like a fairy tale. It's a rocky story, but
Sure.
obviously for real. Like, is that how you can perceive it or look at it as well when you're kind of making these?
Yeah, because they work so different. Because we do get an Edge's character development, but it's not the same, right? I mean, I think I think when Adam walks down the street, he hears Edge a lot more than he hears Adam, right?
Yeah,
I think Mark can walk down the street and not everybody knows he's the Undertaker, even though he's this huge dude. Um, so yeah, I mean, the Undertaker is such a unique character in that, yeah, he's a comic book figure,
yeah,
but he's come to life, and it's just different. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think both of them, I think getting into who Adam was a bigger part of his story for sure.
Hmm. I mean, you talk about obviously the transition and things of that nature. One of the things I thought, I mean, I think they both were up your alley as far as like sensibilities go because you're digging into the human. And when I said character exploration for the Undertaker, I did kind of mean more digging into the character of Mark Calloway, I guess
Oh,
you could
sure.
say.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When you're but when I looked at it, I felt like Edge's was a little bit more along the lines of maybe your style because a lot of what you've done in the past has been that underdog who shouldn't do it,
Right, right.
but and obviously an athlete, sportsman, but then obviously ultimately they achieve it. So did you kind of feel that with Edge's a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, his, his story, his upbringing, really coming from, you know, lower, tougher upbringing with single parent home, moving constantly from apartment to apartment, starting there. And then really the guy just gets so focused on the fact that he's going to be a wrestler at such an early age and making it happen that way, but really going through the grind. And I don't think Adam gets enough credit for that.
Yeah.
And you hear it during the show also. I don't think some people thought he paid his dues, and it's like, wow, he
Yeah.
really paid his dues. And then reaching the pinnacle and then having to give it up because of the neck injury, and that's pretty tough. So yeah, that does fall more into where I come from in terms of storytelling, and I'm not a big fan of just retelling things, what I mean? So I love to get into this stuff a little bit, and it was, let people get to know these people, the characters as much as they can. And Adam, I think is a really compelling guy and interesting character, with everything he's gone through. You know, he's not going to tell you that things were awful as a kid. You know what I mean? He never does that. You can tell, you can kind of see why he's done as well as he has, because that's not his mindset. That's not where he's at.
Yeah.
His mindset was what was good, and the stuff he did have rather than what he didn't. And I think that's really cool about him. And I think, so that, yeah, he did have that underdog kind of vibe about him for sure. And he made it. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like there's especially with Adam, like it's really, really relatable. Like, because he's kind of just the everyday guy. Like when he's not Edge, he's just and he always says, I always go by Adam. I don't let people call me Edge. I don't call myself Edge. So he's just, and then
Yeah.
his demeanor, like how he is, it's just like so down to earth. It's incredibly relatable.
I mean, he belongs in Asheville. Like Asheville's a perfect place for him. He's up in the
Yeah.
mountains.
Yeah.
He bought that house when as a single guy. Like he was single when he bought the house. That's before Beth that he bought it. And it's just funny. It's just like a perfect place for him to live. It's a very chilled out town.
What was it
You
like for you traveling there?
I used to live in North Carolina, so we would head up to Asheville once in a while. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's grown a lot, but it's a really neat place. Some great restaurants. You have great, there's wine, vineyards all over the place there, which is pretty cool. And it's just it's a great, like very interesting, unique place. It doesn't feel like North Carolina at all. It feels like you're, somewhere else actually up in the
Yeah.
mountains. So it's very cool.
Nice. You said, but like in the last time we spoke, that Undertaker was kind of part of like the reason or part of like the fact of like swaying Edge into like, hey, you should do this,
Yeah. Yeah.
because he was hesitant for whatever reason. And
Yep.
I read in an interview, I think just before the doc came out, that he said he looked at it as like, oh, like it digs deeper into my life and who I am, and that might be good for my girls when they're older and they're like, oh, who's our dad?
That was very important to him, and to have that documented for his girls who weren't around during most of his career. They've known him through really the retirement years.
Yeah.
That's when he settled down, and now I think for them to see him wrestling, and for their mother too. I mean, she retired as well, during that same time. So for them to see them active with wrestling, I think is cool to see his story, uh, to get to know about his mother, who is so important to him. So all that stuff, and to see Orangeville and see what that was all about for him, I think that really gives him like that It's documented for him. And that's what Mark had told him. He's like, hey, look, you're gonna not really want to talk about some of this stuff, but then it's done and it's in a nice little show and you could show
Yeah.
it to kids and everything like that and their kids and that's cool. So that I think that's kind of how he sold them, and that's what Adam. He hadn't done a whole lot of documentary work. I mean, there's a few on him, but like it wasn't like with Undertaker, we had to deal with the fact that they just did the 8-part series on him.
Yeah.
So but Adam hadn't really had one in a while, so
Mm.
this was good for him to do.
Yeah, and I read somewhere that someone was talking about this Edge A&E biography, and they were a bit critical, but I didn't necessarily agree with it. They were like, "Oh, it's kind of we've seen it all or heard it all," and I was like, "I don't think so," because nothing's really dug this deep into Adam's life beforehand and how it
Yeah,
really
yeah.
fleshed it out. So I kind of like didn't see where they were coming from, and I didn't agree with that because you guys unpicked. I knew some of the elements, I guess you could say, but again, not to that detail. Because I mean, you even got the letter.
Right,
He
right.
said, like, I've heard about that before, but I've never heard the actual words in the
Sure.
letter. The story about his uncle. Like, I never knew that hit
Yeah.
quite hard. And you like Edge said he was even shocked that you got like footage from the first show he went to, and so
Hmm.
you dug really really deep, and that's
Oh
what
yeah.
really hit me, and I was like, wow, this is like I never knew this.
No,
And
that's cool because that's really what we want to do. And like, that is the danger with these guys. You have a guy who's been, he's 30 years as a professional wrestler. People know a lot about him. And with the internet now, you can do a deep dive on anybody and start finding things, and all of a sudden you can just go in that rabbit hole and just kind of hone in and watch a lot. And our goal was to kind of like make sure we collected all that plus found some new things, and that was, and it's tricky, it definitely is with these guys, because you can end up in that place where you're like, I know they've seen this before and I don't want to waste too much time on it,
yeah,
but it's a huge part of their life. And if we don't do it, then we're going to get killed for that too. When you're not doing the viewers, and the other thing is too, like, I think the A&E viewer, you can't assume that the A&E viewer is a huge wrestling fan.
yeah,
I think you have to assume that it could be anybody watching that just likes these type of shows. It's like documentaries, they like the biography series, all that stuff, and so we had to kind of balance all that stuff. So it is tricky, but yeah, things like the letter, you
were you
know,
shocked that you were able to find that? Because I was stunned that you had it.
what, Adam was pretty sure he had it. And then we reached out to Ron. Yeah, he confirmed it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we didn't know what kind of condition it was. Like, it was amazing. He's had it in the envelope. He had everything. Like, it was really cool. So yeah, and the other thing that was great is Adam's just a few years yeah, younger than Mark, and in the age of guys videotaping themselves, and they knew they had to make a tape, and so they taped everything,
Yeah,
and so they can make those tapes so they could go to send it off to agents and things like that and hope they could be discovered. So that helped us a lot too. And Adam had a lot of it. His mom kept a lot of it for him, which was
yeah.
fantastic. So
Yeah, no, I mean, do you think being able to, at least from a viewer standpoint, I think it had a huge effect on how much you're able to get out of Adam because you found all these things and you really able to dig so deep. Do you feel like that really allowed you to kind of almost go beyond, above and beyond with Adam? Like he was
oh,
really
for
able to like
sure,
open up.
because I think he's talked about the other stuff, and I think they're ready for that. It was nice to hit him with things that maybe he wasn't ready for, and I think he was so good. Like, we were sitting there, we had this theater in Asheville that we did the main interview in,
Yeah,
and it was we sat him down for about maybe 4 hours, and really got into it. And when he would get into some of these stories, I remember Yaron and I would just look at each other like, "Oh my god, like this is crazy! Yeah, he's so good at this," and he liked it seemed like the more challenging thing that if we made him dig in a little bit more about something, he was better on it, and he seemed to enjoy it more. So yeah, I think it was actually similar with Mark too. They both seem to like when you got past the initial layer of a play-by-play of a wrestling match. If you could get into the behind the scenes that they were okay talking about, or get into the story leading up to it, they like that a lot better. So
Something that related to them kind of on an emotional level.
yeah, and it was just something different, maybe something they don't talk about every day, or when they go to these autograph signings and have to, talk about the Foley match for the 800th time.
Yeah.
It's nice to maybe talk about another aspect of it,
Yeah.
and I think that's what they like.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I say I think you can really tell your work going into like finding all that stuff really landed was that moment where he breaks down when he talks about signing with WWE. And you can tell, like, because obviously you've now unpicked all this stuff, and he's almost gone through the journey again. And it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
hit
yeah.
him, and it's like because I wasn't expecting it when he says it. And
Right.
he just pauses, and it hit me. Like,
Yeah, I mean, and it hit us too because we weren't ready for him to be overly emotional there. It just wasn't something we thought was going to crush him, and it shows how much that meant to him. Like everything in his life had been building up to that contract, to get that deal, to become like a WWE superstar. Like was like he's drawing pictures of it, his whole upbringing.
yeah,
It's fascinating. So it really was everything to him. It really was.
yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, I absolutely adored just not just that part. I mean, there's so many parts that actually got me emotional. Like obviously with his kids, things like that. How open was he with that? Like just you being able to film his
he
kids and
it,
things like
it
that.
was he was okay. It's the first time they've really kind of done anything with the kids, so it took a little doing. So we kind of stuck our toe in the water with it, and we are like, all right, here's what we get this. Can we just get you guys around the house just being dad with the kids, and we'll just be fly on the wall, you guys just live. And then it was kind of like Beth was like, well, why don't we take them for ice cream?
Okay.
Okay. Great. We'll go to the ice cream place. We'll get everything cleared out, and it was no problem. And it was like little by little, I felt like they kind of felt more comfortable with us, and because we weren't the usual WWE people that they'd always work with, so that was the other thing too. So they don't know us, you know what I mean, and we're trying to gain their trust and everything like that. So he was very careful with them. And rightfully so. They're kids, and you just don't want to put them in a tough spot or over put them out there too much and all that. And I got that, and we understood, and we also knew we didn't need that much time with the kids, like because
Yeah.
kids are so the interactions with adults and kids and parents and their kids, you're gonna get something pretty quickly, if they're just being themselves and living their lives. That's interesting. That may not even be interesting to them, but it's fun to be the fly on the wall once in a while,
Yeah. It's not like, when you were trying to talk to Undertaker's mother and trying to get something there.
Right. It's different that way.
Yeah. One of the things I was curious to ask you was this is going back a little bit because you told me about your how you were a fan. Like you watched obviously when you were younger, and then you watched a little bit of like kind of the NWO, and then you kind of dipped out of it. But
Mm-hmm.
you were aware of Undertaker because when you were a fan, he was still very much there and on top, and obviously he's been around forever. Edge kind of seemed, from what you've told me, he got big post your
Correct.
wrestling fandom. So what was like because I think Christian put it brilliantly. He's quietly had one of the greatest careers of all time, Edge.
Yeah,
So like
that's
quietly
a
being
great
like the key
point.
words. Yeah, like
Yeah, and I thought you're right about that. He nailed that line in when he said that answer. Um, it- I knew about Edge for sure. Like they did a good job with him. He'd show up on like the MTVs, and things
yeah,
like that. You'd see him on different like pop culture moments, the Slim Jim
Slim Jim. Yeah,
commercials, which are great. And I would, like I said, I'd tune in once in a while, so I knew who he was. I knew all about, and I remember the ladder matches. That was a
okay.
huge deal with the Hardys and all that stuff. The Dudleys, all those guys going crazy on the ladders. Like that's when I was like, what's going on? I mean, I remember checking out that stuff and I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. But
So you saw the spear off the.
oh yeah,
Oh,
like I remember that stuff. That stuff was awesome. And I was like, whoa, this is totally changing this whole world of wrestling has gone from like the outlaw like wrestling world where they're just burning them, set themselves on fire and all that stuff. It's now kind of coming into the mainstream, you know.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I knew all that stuff. You know, to be honest, I didn't know the whole story with his injury and the injuries with the neck and how serious it had gotten and all that. I knew that he'd come back. I knew that he had to retire and I knew that he'd come back, but I didn't really follow during that time. So finding out that story was really, eye-opening and to see what he'd gone through. And like I didn't know the backstory either of with his story with Beth, like when they had met and when that kind of all came to be either. I knew who Beth was as well, but I wasn't like a huge fan. I just knew who she was.
Hmm.
So it was cool getting to learn all that. And I think that actually, in some ways, makes us better because we're going to ask more of the questions that maybe the usual wrestling journalists may not because they know those answers, where we're just kind of like, all right, what about this? And
Yeah.
something real basic and it ends up being something really cool to talk about. But I think like going back to Christian's answer, I think that's one of the things with Adam and Edge, and I think he battles with it a little bit in terms of does he get enough respect for what he did? He doesn't say it, and I think he's okay. I think he's very satisfied with his career. I think he's very proud of it, and he should be. Um, I do think sometimes he's a little bit like, I don't know why I'm not more popular, and or more in that Mount Rushmore of wrestlers.
Conversation. Yeah.
Because he's not, and he's just that next level, and it is interesting because he's been around a long time. He's a really handsome guy. He's great with the microphone. He's been a successful actor. But he's never had that big, like he hasn't had that breakthrough like The Rock did in the movies, or
Yeah.
I mean, he's like that good career. It's just, I don't know. He's a really interesting guy in that way. And I don't think I think it bothers him to a degree. I think it might bother some people around him more than that. I think Christian's kind of like, I don't know why he's not a bigger deal than he is, but he's still a big deal. So it's pretty
Yeah.
neat.
I think maybe part of that is because he's so chill, should we say, for lack of a better word, on the surface, that maybe he just, because he lets it go, I think it doesn't
Yeah.
fester up as much, you could say.
Yeah, for sure. And it is funny though, because Yaron and I would talk about it all the time. Like, you would tell people about you're working on The Undertaker and everybody knows The Undertaker is.
Yeah.
Then just a few less know who Edge is. And it was always kind of like, or it'd be the female population definitely knew who Edge was. So we had that.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. One of my best,
Especially like the 35 to 40-year-old female usually knew who he was. So
one of my best friends, she's a little bit younger than me, and we spoke about WWE, and she got into it, I think maybe a little later, or she got back into it a little later, and Edge was well retired by this point. And she just randomly said it once. She's like, you know who I love? I was like, who? She's like, Edge. I was like, he's been gone forever. But
right.
it stuck in her mind for obvious
Yeah,
reasons.
yeah. I get it. He's a handsome man.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I will say that I really loved that I found even more relatable in this one was it's not always dominated or led, shall I say, by Edge. Because there's the moments at the beginning where I think it's his cousin Matt.
Yep.
He's the one driving you guys around and like explaining, oh, this is Orangeville, this is where
Yep.
Edge lived, this is where so and so lived. So there's a lot of voices, strong voices, and in that aspect, which I found really fascinating. Because, and I remember a quote. I interviewed the creators of Dark Side of the Ring a couple of years ago, and they one of them said, Evan Husney, he's told me that what's more fascinating to them is interviewing the human beings connected to the wrestlers, like the family members. That's like,
They finished the story, and I think with Adam too, the one thing he doesn't talk about is his father was never around.
hmm,
I mean, he doesn't talk about it at all. He didn't bring it up. He doesn't allude to it. He doesn't want to talk about it. And I think part of his upbringing was the fact that all these other guys were there. He always had like a male role model around, cousins, uncles, they were always around him. And I think, in his story, I think that was kind of what we wanted to get across. At least all these people were in his life. And, another guy, Christian's father, was somebody that I kind of wish in hindsight we'd reach out. I'm not sure if he's even alive,
hmm,
but that we'd kind of gotten, because I didn't know until we interviewed Christian that his father was very close with Edge, and how close Adam was to their family as well. But that was a whole nother deal, was getting him with the AEW situation. That was a tricky
yes.
deal. So he was like an 11th hour interview for the show. Thank God we got him.
Yeah, oh, it adds, you can't. I think you can't tell Edge's story without a Christian.
Yeah, we were up against it with that situation. I'm glad we got it. Everybody worked things out. Adam actually helped. Adam and Jay actually got it done. I think really they just both said, "Let's just do it. Can we get him in?" And luckily Jay had gotten back from a trip to Canada and had a day and had a couple hours, and he was like, I'll do it. And so everybody put down their guns for a moment and let us let us do our work. So I'm really glad we got him, and I appreciate it, from Adam and from Jay working that out and getting it done.
Yeah, I mean, it would have really been such a different documentary without Christian.
You just can't, I
Yeah.
mean, their story is so intertwined, and that was the thing Adam kept saying, and we let him watch the rough cut, and which I hate doing, because sometimes it ends up being things, notes that you're like, you know this would have been fine if he had seen it like with everybody else. But
Yeah.
the one thing it really got him was that we had to use an older interview with Jay, and he was just like, you got to let's get a new Jay interview in there. Let's get a new one. So that really drove him nuts. And then, so he got Jay into it, and then we were good to go. So
That's great, and I love that about Edge. Like, like they always say it, that he's gonna manifest things. He's gonna, if he sets his mind to it, and like he did it for this as well.
he does. I mean, the guy is, I don't know if micromanager is fair to him, but yeah, when he wants to get something done, he's going to do it. He's definitely that guy, and I think it's funny because as we were shooting with him, we definitely got a flavor of Adam, and then Edge. Once in a while, he'd turn into Edge. Like something would just rub him wrong, or he was not happy with how something was going, and he'd give us a little bit of short Adam. And it was you're just like, whoa, we're just the chilled out guy drinking coffee over there, and then what happened? And then he'd laugh about it, and he's a good guy, very, very nice guy. But when he has something in mind and how it's going to go, he really wants it to go that way, I'll be very curious what he does. I'm sure you saw, like, after the Toronto match the other night,
Yes.
basically saying next year will be it, and he's been standing by that, and I think he's being honest. I don't.
Did he mention that to you as well? Like before?
He had said when we first started shooting that I think his contract runs. I don't know for sure. I think he had said it runs through next year or something like that. I didn't know when exactly. It sounds like it may be around that Toronto deal. I thought it was more of a WrestleMania situation, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so he had mentioned that, he'd planned on, I think the initial plan was for him to work monthly and to get there, and then at the end he'd hang it up, because then he could go out on his own. And I think he's still in that realm. I think he seems happy right now with his role and the new character development. That always adds a little bit of fire to him.
Yeah.
You got a little bit of sense of that in the show, when he gets the initial character of Edge and has no clue what the hell it is, and nobody else does, and now he's
And
got to figure it out.
I mean, and he's a nobody, and he's got the balls to say no.
Yeah, and but you see, like that. I think in some ways he liked that because it allowed him to find it, and to find the character because he wants to do it. He's been drawing these costumes. He's been, figuring out who these guys are in his head for years. I mean, one of the fascinating things with Adam, and Undertaker said this to me about him. He said, he's like, I think he has this wrestling like photographic memory. He's like, he can rattle off an entire match and the moves that are going to happen just off the top of his head, knowing because in his head, he'll do the match in his head before he matches with, and he said before he wrestles somebody. And he actually had said that when he would have downtime, especially in the early years, he would do these matches with guys he hadn't wrestled before, just in case he would have to wrestle them in the future. So he would write it down in his notebook. We got to see it in the extended cuts. There's this huge crate he has, and it might be, I'll find it. I wonder if WWE.com has it out there or whatever. They used it, I think, for the post shows and things like that. His mom saved all these stuff in these notebooks. And in each notebook is what he would write out for move by move for each match.
Wow.
And then he'd go, talk it over with Cena or whoever. And he showed us there's a Van Damme one that was great, where literally it was like move by move in that notebook matched up right with what he had there. It was crazy, but I think that's him though, and knowing and wanting to control things and the ability to do it, and because he knows what he's talking about.
Absolutely. And I kind of forget how closely tied he was to Undertaker because they had this huge program in 2008, I believe, and they went for like a year. So I forget that. Oh, like obviously Undertaker worked with him regularly at the top of his game. So yeah, I forget that. But one of the things I did want to say, I want to ask you, sorry, in regards to the shots that you've got with this, like some of the exterior shots, it seemed like you're a bit more playful with this. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but some of the VHS style shots seem to be like recreations and effects and stuff. Really well done effects. They're seamless,
right?
But it really adds, because obviously it adds to the vibe and the era that they're talking
that's
about.
cool. They were. That was Yaron and I talked about it for both of these shows actually going into them. And the Undertaker and the Edge, and we're like, oh man, I think there's gonna be parts where really the recreation could help us,
Yeah.
And then I got through when I was doing Undertaker, I was kind of like, I think I can get by without it. I think we have a style we can create with this. I think I can do without it. But we really felt like when we came to Edge's backstory that sprinkling in a little bit with the other VHS stuff could be kind of cool, and it may work. And I think it helped tell the story. But yeah, that was definitely they did not have the camera around the living room when he was watching wrestling, unfortunately. But yeah, we did the best we could to kind of give it a flow and a feel that wasn't too overbearing, where you'd be like, that's really bad,
That's always the risk with recreations, because it can go quite bad, and I've seen ones that weren't great, shall we say. I'm sure you have too.
Oh, for sure. And we had so much shot, and my goal always with it was like, any chance we get, the first shot that we take out will be recreation, like over real B-roll or real action stuff. Lose that first, and then because I think less of that was more, and that's kind of what we wanted out of it.
Did you do any other recreations, or was it mainly just the VHS ones? Sorry.
I think that was it in there. There was stuff I don't even know if it made it. When he and Jay are distributing flyers for that match, I don't know if it made the.
Oh, you did recreations for that when they were.
We did.
I don't think that was in there. He talks about it, but I don't think.
I think it's in the. I think it's in the extra stuff. That's there's like for these shows, you have to make a cut with 8 additional minutes for the European air. They have 8 less commercial hours.
Okay.
Minutes. So for each hour, it's 4 minutes per hour. You've got to create something. And so some of the stuff I'm trying to remember if it was in there in the main show or if it was in the extended. So
Oh, okay. Oh, that's quite interesting. Didn't know that. Must be a bit of a hassle for you sometimes.
yeah, it gets like I think it was harder for Edge and for Adam for Mark because I had like for Undertaker I had a couple things that I just loved that I was going to try to sneak into the show almost as like a out of commercial, just a little minute long something that was just something unique. Like he has a story about a conversation he had with Andre the Giant,
Hmm.
right? This is Undertaker and Andre the Giant that Andre said, and that was like Mark's favorite guy, that one day he's got a plan for them. And
Yeah.
he wouldn't tell him what it was, wouldn't say what it was. And so we did this little thing on it, and nobody ever knew what it was, but it was a cool little minute and a half, something that we could throw in there. And it's in the extended version, but it didn't make the show. So when we had a bunch of little ones like that for that, Adam, we didn't have as much of that little kind of vignette kind of thing that we cut for it just to see if we could make it work.
Hmm.
So it was a little different, but we did have like some really cool extra shoots that we were able to do with him at his house, going through the old stuff that his mom had saved. You know, that was really neat. So
Yeah. And just my last question, Kory. The intro, I remember you talked about it before, the whole explaining what wrestling is and whatnot. It does a wonderful job explaining what it is. But it made me think, like he explains it and you see how difficult this is, right? Compared to other art forms. So how and why do you think wrestling is painted with such of that lowbrow brush when in fact we see it's so much more difficult than so many more other art forms?
you know, that's a great question because it's something we talked about all the time. Because I become more and more impressed with these guys as I was going along. Because you're like, wait a second, you're just doing this off the top of your head. You're just kind of giving a direction. And you're just doing it, and I'm like, yeah. And I still don't get the match management. I really don't. I mean, it to me, it's crazy impressive that
Mm,
you would know the other wrestlers' moves that they've got to get into the match, and you've got to get your own into the match, and they have to know yours, and you also have to know what's going to get you to that move, and that's just the stuff in the ring, and then you've got to do this whole soap opera drama that is kind of sketched out for you, and for a while they were really scripted, but now at times with these guys like with Mark and with Adam, like they just all they wanted, I know, is give me some bullet points and then I can work off of that and I'll
yeah,
deliver, and so yeah, I don't know, I guess it's almost like how we look at soap operas, right? Like it's a little notch below the other dramas, a primetime drama maybe,
yeah,
but the skill to do what they do is probably insanely high,
yeah,
because it's got to be harder. Um, but yeah, I don't, I think it's because I think people don't look so much at the whole package of what this person is doing. What they're pulling off is really impressive to get, and it's you hear it a lot more now. But the wrestling buzzword now is storytelling. You hear it a lot from these guys. You didn't
yeah,
hear that back in the day.
yeah,
I think that the more people hear that, the more like, oh yeah, they are kind of telling a story. This has been this whole feud for 6 months or for 3 years, and this has been working. This is what's been going on. I I think when people look at the big picture of things and they realize the whole package, they have to be like, wow, that's really impressive. You know?
yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree with you. And interesting. I was going to say, I had a conversation about it wasn't necessarily about Hollywood per se, but it was about theater with one of my friends who's an actress. And we talked about like how prices for tickets can be so extortionate, and obviously like working class people need to come, etc., all those kind of things. And she's like it's a class system. It's like it's just made for the upper class or the work the fancy folk, if you will. And she's like, and then that's why it's kind of like this when they look at other things, they're like, this is the posh stuff. Other things are less than. So perhaps that's
Probably true. That there's some truth to it because wrestling's done a good job keeping things pretty affordable, right? Even
yeah,
like their merchandise, like you can get a $22, $23 t-shirt, or it goes on sale. Like they do a great job with things like that, so you can afford it. The tickets aren't horrible. Yeah, no, if you go to like if I take my wife and kids to like a baseball game, that can be up to like a $500 night just for
Oh,
one game, maybe
yeah,
more. It's crazy. It's just a
yeah,
lot. So yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's always a fascinating thing to me. That's one of the things I really like talking about this kind of dynamic, and that's always fascinated me about wrestling and film and this merging is the relationship between the industries. And now it's got better, but I still think there is that like looking down upon like it's wrestling.
Yeah, it is funny, but I do think it has gotten better, and I think guys like The Rock, I think Cena, their success now is kind of helping things out a little bit.
Yeah,
Edge has had a nice little career. These guys, as they cross over, I think people see how talented they really are.
yeah, absolutely. And I thank you for the work that you're doing, because I think these stories as well, like the human nature of them as well, it will connect beyond just the wrestling fan, and people can see like, oh well, there's more to these folk than we saw on TV.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. No, it's a lot of fun, and they are, some of the most interesting people I've ever met. No doubt, not about it. Like they've gone through what they've gone through to become who they are and to reach the successes they've had is amazing to me. They're really amazing people.
I mean, is there anything more relatable though than something like Edge's story? I don't think there is. Like
No,
anyone can relate to that, right?
no, it absolutely is. I think having that underdog, kid from not a whole lot, kind of always kind of wanted to do this, and he makes it with his best friend.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
yeah.
ridiculous story. I mean, if you made a movie about it, it kind of seemed a little far fetched. You know what I mean?
I think Edge says that in documentaries. Like if you pitch this to Hollywood, they're like, no, that's not
Right.
possible.
And it's ridiculous,
Yeah,
so that's what's so cool about it, and the fact that, they're both going,
yeah,
Jay's still going too. It's amazing. They're 48 years old. It's
yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah. No, amazing. And thank you again for the time, Kory. So it's always a pleasure, and I'm obviously after seeing these two projects, I'm so excited to see what you do. I believe it's next year. I think you said that they will come out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's January. I don't want to. I might be wrong, but I think it's
yeah.
January when the next run will start. But yeah, these will be good. These are going to be two good ones that we have from our team. So that'll be fun.
I'm excited, and I hopefully we'll chat about those two, and our chats will be online in the coming weeks as well. So I can
Awesome.
I'll let you know when they're up as well.
Sounds great.
Thanks
Thanks.
so much, Kory.
All right. Take care.
Cheers, you too. And that was my interview with Kory Kozak. I really, really hope you enjoyed that. I loved it. I loved every second of that chat. Kory's just so cool, man. He's really, really good. So insightful, and I love the range of topics and conversations we go into beyond just the Edge documentary, and then the extra insight he gives in how Edge is, his passion, his commitment, the trust in filming his children, so much stuff. It's really, really great stuff, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed it, sorry, and I hope you continue to support and enjoy this podcast. I love doing it. It's bi-weekly currently, obviously, and that's a nice format, but maybe one day will be weekly for those of you who just miss me in the 2 week gaps that we have. But like I said, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you continue to support the podcast. Please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And I'll see you again in another 2 weeks. This has been the Wrestling and Film Podcast, Episode 5, Brother.